The curtains are drawn tight at Richmond Palace. The year is 1603. England's most powerful queen, Elizabeth Tudor, lies still in her chamber. For 45 years, she was untouchable. They called her the Virgin Queen Gloriana, England's golden monarch. She faced down kings and popes, commanded fleets against the Spanish Armada, and turned her very body into a crown, a symbol of purity and divine favor. But when the final veil was lifted, when the women who had served her most faithfully prepared her for burial, what they found was not the shining image of an immortal queen. It was something horrifying, something so grotesque that it was buried twice, once in the coffin and once in the silence of those who dared not speak. Imagine the scene: heavy velvet curtains shutting out the Sunday, candles flickering, their smoke curling into the air like restless spirits. The body of Elizabeth, wrapped in crimson cloth, laid out on the polished floor. Her once dazzling face, painted white for decades, had collapsed into a pale, waxen mask, her lips cracked, her eyes vacant. To the world outside, she was still Gloriana. But inside this chamber, her legend was already crumbling. Whispers raced through the court. Some said she had gone mad in her final days, raving in riddles, laughing at shadows only she could see. Others insisted she had been poisoned. But nothing could prepare her attendants for what they would uncover when they unpinned the wig, when they unfastened the corset, when they removed the mask of lead and paint that had hidden the truth for so long. The stench filled the chamber. Beneath the silks and powders lay bruises, blisters, scars, and perhaps something even more unthinkable. One doctor crossed himself. Another stepped back in horror. A queen who had ruled with iron will, who had defied every expectation of her age, had kept a terrible secret sealed within her own flesh. And yet, in life, Elizabeth had never faltered. She danced at court masques, delivered thunderous speeches, stared down her enemies with eyes that blazed like fire. All the while, her body was failing, her skin poisoned, her organs unraveling. She wore her mask not only for beauty, but for survival. To abandon it would have been to let the world see weakness, and weakness was death. This is not the Elizabeth of painted portraits or romantic poetry. This is the Elizabeth hidden in shadow, the queen, who may have been more myth than woman. 4 centuries later, her coffin remains sealed in Westminster Abbey. The question lingers still: what truth lies beneath the stone? To understand the secret of Elizabeth Tudor, we must return to the moment of her birth. She entered the world in the year 1533, the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. Her arrival was no celebration. The king had risked everything for a son, tearing England from Rome to marry Anne, only to be given another daughter. Disappointment hung heavy over the cradle. And within 3 short years, the child's world collapsed. Anne Boleyn was accused of adultery and treason. She walked barefoot to the scaffold at the Tower of London and was beheaded with a French sword. Elizabeth, stripped of her title of princess, declared a bastard, learned from the beginning that her very existence was fragile, balanced on politics and blood. Yet she grew into something her enemies could not destroy. Tutors trained her in languages, history, philosophy. She mastered Latin, Greek, Italian, French, and spoke with such sharpness that even hardened diplomats left in awe. Beneath her learning was survival. Elizabeth understood that words could be weapons, and that her mind had to be her armor. But England in the mid-16th century was a battlefield of faith and power. Her half-brother Edward reigned briefly, then died young. Her half-sister Mary seized the throne and unleashed fire against Protestants. Elizabeth was thrown into the Tower, accused of treason, staring at the same walls that had seen her mother's final walk. She expected at any moment to hear the footsteps of the executioner. Only by chance, or perhaps by cunning restraint, she survived. In 1558, Mary died childless. At 25 years old, Elizabeth was crowned queen. She inherited a country divided by religion, weakened by debt, and threatened by enemies abroad. Most believed a woman could not rule alone. Parliament pressed her to marry, to produce an heir, to bind her power to the body of a man. But Elizabeth refused. She declared herself wedded to England. She turned her unmarried state into a weapon. Pearls, the symbol of chastity, hung heavy around her neck. Her face was painted white with lead paste, not only to mask smallpox scars, but to become a living icon of purity. The Virgin Queen, a monarch who answered to no husband, no man. Yet this choice came at a price. Every year that passed without a marriage, without a child, sharpened the whispers. Ambassadors wrote home with questions. Why did she hide her body so fiercely? Why did she rage if anyone saw her undressed? Why did her closest companions risk everything to keep her chamber so private? The Queen's own words reveal her obsession with control. "I will have but one mistress, and no master," she told Parliament. But beneath the defiance, there was unease. She laughed too loudly at jokes about marriage. She punished too harshly those who hinted at heirs. And she wore her mask of white thicker with every year, until her face seemed less flesh than marble. Elizabeth turned her body into the foundation of her crown. It was not simply the body of a woman, but the body of England itself. If that body were ever exposed as weak, diseased, or incapable, the illusion of divine monarchy would collapse. This is why her image had to be flawless, why the mask could never slip. And it is why, when she finally died, the attendants who prepared her body confronted not just the decay of a queen, but the collapse of an entire myth. The question is, were the rumors of her hidden deformities and poisoned flesh only slander, or did the Virgin Queen carry a darker secret than anyone dared admit? Elizabeth Tudor built her throne upon an image, that of the Virgin Queen. Yet, in the whispers of her own time, that image was always fragile. Beneath the pearls and paint, rumors bloomed like shadows in a palace corridor. The first and most persistent centered on Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. He was her childhood companion, her favorite at court, the man whose presence at her side endured for decades. Courtiers whispered of stolen glances, secret meetings, even a hidden child spirited away in silence. One story claimed that Elizabeth had secretly borne Dudley's son in a secluded wing of the palace, a child raised far from London's eyes. Yet not a scrap of evidence survives, and Elizabeth's body never bore the signs of childbirth. Still, the rumors clung, fed by the simple truth that Dudley's closeness was undeniable and dangerous. Others whispered a different tale, one not of passion but of incapacity. Elizabeth, they said, was not only unmarried, but unable to bear children at all. Some claimed she suffered from hidden deformities, scars concealed beneath her elaborate gowns. Ambassadors wrote home puzzled by her refusal to allow even physicians to examine her. There were whispers of irregularities in her body, of conditions that made intimacy impossible. To some, her virginity was not a choice of power, but the inevitable result of secret affliction. And then came the wildest rumor of all, the Bisley Boy. In this legend, Elizabeth did not survive childhood at all. According to the story, she died suddenly as a young girl, while staying in the village of Bisley. Her caretakers, terrified of Henry VIII's wrath, replaced her with a look-alike. Not a girl, but a boy. The boy was dressed in the princess's gowns, trained to mimic her manners, and presented to the king as his daughter. And when Anne Boleyn's child should have been buried, an impostor continued her life, one day ascending the throne as Elizabeth I. Centuries later, the Bisley Boy legend became fodder for writers and villagers alike. They pointed to her long fingers, her strong jaw, her androgynous portraits, her refusal to marry. They asked why she guarded her body so fiercely, why her chamber was so secret, why no physician ever confirmed her womanhood. They even claimed that when her tomb was sealed, those present were warned never to reveal what they saw. Most historians dismiss this tale as fantasy, a story born of Catholic propaganda and village gossip. And yet, the rumor refuses to die. For every denial, there is a lingering doubt. Could a boy truly have deceived the greatest courts of Europe? Could a kingdom have been built on such a deception? Or is the endurance of the story itself a reflection of how carefully Elizabeth hid her private self? Whether through tales of hidden lovers, concealed deformities, or swapped identities, the whispers all point to the same truth. Elizabeth's body was never her own. It was a battlefield, a symbol, a mystery her subjects and enemies alike tried to decode. She may have crafted the mask of the Virgin Queen, but the rumors remind us that no mask can ever be perfect. And so, the question deepens. Were these only the inventions of jealous rivals and political enemies? Or did fragments of truth slip through the silence of her reign? If there was truth to be found, it would have to come from the evidence letters, portraits, and perhaps even the body itself. But what those who prepared her for burial claimed to see was more disturbing than any rumor ever whispered. Rumors alone cannot strip away a crown. If Elizabeth's secret truly existed, then some trace must linger in the words of those who served her, in the letters of foreign ambassadors, in the faint evidence that time has not erased. And when we sift through these fragments, a troubling picture begins to emerge. We start with the letters. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth was watched closely by diplomats from Spain, France, and Venice. Their reports home are filled with admiration for her wit, but also with perplexity at her secrecy. One Venetian envoy noted that the Queen will not permit the hand of any physician upon her person. A Spanish observer asked why no midwife had ever confirmed her fertility, as was common in arranged royal marriages. These questions may seem trivial now, but in the 16th century, a queen's body was not private. It was the property of the dynasty, expected to bear heirs. Elizabeth's refusal to allow scrutiny made her unique and suspicious. Then there are the accounts of her attendants. Ladies-in-waiting, who slept in chambers beside hers, confessed that they never once saw her unclothed. She dismissed servants for daring to enter without warning. She raged at artists whose portraits showed even a hint of imperfection. One maid wrote that Elizabeth demanded her cosmetics be applied in layers so thick that her face resembled a mask more than living flesh. It was not vanity alone, it was concealment. Medical traces sharpened the image. In 1562, Elizabeth contracted smallpox. She survived, but scars lingered. To mask them, she began using a cosmetic mixture known as Venetian ceruse, white lead powder, mixed with vinegar and perfume. At first, it gave her the pale, unearthly glow we see in portraits. But modern analysis of surviving samples reveals concentrations of lead so dangerous that daily use would have poisoned the skin, entered the blood, and slowly corroded the body from within. Contemporaries noticed changes. Her hair thinned and receded, her teeth blackened, her temper grew explosive. She complained of headaches, fatigue, stomach pain. These are classic symptoms of chronic lead poisoning. Yet Elizabeth refused to abandon her paint, to let the world see her scars, her aging, her weakness that would have been more dangerous than the poison itself. And so, day after day, she layered the mask, preserving her image while her body suffered beneath it. Portraits themselves serve as evidence. Early images show a lively young woman. Later paintings commissioned and approved by the crown flatten her features, erase wrinkles, elongate her body into an almost androgynous form. Art historians now believe these were deliberately altered. Propaganda meant to conceal the truth. Beneath the paint on canvas, as beneath the paint on her skin, lay a reality too fragile to reveal. And then there is the matter of her death. In March 1603, Elizabeth refused to lie down. Standing for hours in silence, her eyes fixed on nothing, she muttered strange words, laughed at shadows, recoiled from mirrors. When she finally collapsed, her attendants moved quickly to prepare the body. No public autopsy was permitted, as was customary for monarchs. But whispers say that those who undressed her recoiled at what they saw. Accounts hint at bruises, sores, discoloration, and perhaps even growths that had been hidden for years. Some describe the smell of rot, the strange texture of her skin. A rumor even claimed that her womb was shriveled, like parchment, confirming her lifelong virginity, or her incapacity. None of these details were ever written into official record. Silence was enforced. Guards stood at the chamber doors. Attendants were sworn to secrecy, yet fragments escaped. Centuries later, restorers uncovered notes suggesting that her death effigy, the wax figure displayed at her funeral, had been sculpted directly from a death mask. That effigy reveals asymmetries: a tilted neck, uneven shoulders, signs of scoliosis. Combined with the reports of strange skin and failing organs, they suggest a body far from the perfection she displayed in life. And still, the most tantalizing evidence remains locked away. Her coffin in Westminster Abbey has never been opened. Forensic science could answer these questions. Was there lead in her bones? Evidence of disease? Traces of a congenital condition? But the Church has refused, declaring that her rest must not be disturbed. The Virgin Queen's secret remains sealed in stone. What we are left with is a mosaic of half-truths: letters that question, portraits that conceal, medical clues that suggest poisoning, and whispers of horrors glimpsed in her final hours. Together, they paint a picture not of a flawless monarch, but of a woman who fought to keep her body hidden even as it betrayed her. If Elizabeth's body was her crown, then it was also her prison. And in death, as in life, it was guarded fiercely, not only by attendants sworn to silence, but by the very weight of history itself. But if these fragments are true, if the Virgin Queen's mask concealed such terrible decay, then what else might have been hidden? And how do we explain the strange phenomena reported long after her death, as though her presence still lingered, restless, unwilling to let go of her secret? The Virgin Queen's body was sealed in silence. Yet silence rarely lasts. Over the centuries, strange stories and eerie phenomena have clung to Elizabeth's name, as though her secret refused to rest. These tales blur the line between history and haunting, hinting that the mask she wore in life may still echo in death. We begin with her final days. Witnesses wrote that she would not lie down, standing motionless for hours, her eyes fixed on empty space. Some swore she whispered to unseen figures, even calling out to her mother, Anne Boleyn, who had been executed decades before. One lady reported hearing her murmur in Latin, words no one else could understand. To her attendants, it seemed as if Elizabeth already stood with one foot in another world. When death finally came, the chamber where her body lay soon became a place of fear. Servants spoke of shadows moving across the walls, though no candles flickered. Some claimed the stench of rot lingered for days, even after the body was sealed. A doctor confessed in a private note that he felt watched every time he approached the corpse, as though the Queen's vacant eyes were still aware, still judging. At Westminster Abbey, where Elizabeth was buried, ghostly legends grew. Tourists and clergy alike have reported the faint sound of footsteps along the marble aisles, accompanied by the rustle of silk skirts. One 19th-century canon described hearing a woman's voice singing softly near the tomb, though the chapel was locked. Others have seen a pale figure, crowned and draped in white, vanish into the stone itself. Many mistake her for Anne Boleyn, but those who look closer insist it is Elizabeth, still guarding her final secret. Richmond Palace, now long vanished, once echoed with uncanny reports. Night watchmen told of hearing laughter, sharp and commanding, reverberating through deserted halls. A Victorian antiquarian swore he saw a tall woman in Elizabethan dress walking across the palace gardens, only to disappear when he approached. Even today, locals whisper that the sight carries a chill, as though something of the Virgin Queen still lingers there. Even more disturbing are the phenomena tied to her portraits. In the 19th century, Restorers, cleaning Elizabeth's images, found layer upon layer of white paint, built up over time to conceal changes beneath. Some restorers claimed they felt uneasy, as though the Queen's painted eyes followed them. One even wrote that as the layers peeled away, it was as if she was resisting exposure, her painted mask fighting to remain intact. And then there is Bisley. The village where the Bisley Boy legend took root has its own spectral tales. In the 19th century, bones of a child were discovered near a manor where Elizabeth once stayed. Locals insisted they belonged to the real princess, hidden away while the impostor ruled. Since then, villagers have whispered of children's laughter in the woods at night, and of a ghostly figure in Tudor dress wandering among the gravestones. Skeptics dismiss these stories as folklore, but even skeptics admit the pattern. Wherever Elizabeth's name lingers, so do whispers of unease. She is not remembered like other monarchs, with solemn dignity and quiet rest. Instead, she appears restless, watchful, defiant, as though her spirit still insists on guarding what her body concealed. Perhaps it is fitting. Elizabeth's entire reign was built on performance. She crafted an image, wore it like armor, and forced the world to believe it. In life, she controlled every detail of her appearance, her words, her myth. In death, the mask may still endure, projected into ghostly forms, footsteps, and whispers. But one question haunts us more than any apparition. Why does her presence linger so powerfully? Is it guilt, fear, or simply the weight of a secret too great to let go? Some say her ghost is not a warning but a defense, keeping intruders from uncovering her coffin. Others suggest it is a cry for truth, a plea for her real story to be told at last. 4 centuries on, her body remains undisturbed beneath stone. Yet her spirit, if the stories are to be believed, walks still. It is as if Elizabeth herself has chosen to rule even in death, cloaked not in pearls and velvet, but in silence, shadow, and mystery. And so, the Virgin Queen endures not only as a monarch in history books, but as a ghost in the corridors of memory. Her reign may have ended, but her enigma has not. The question is no longer only what her body concealed in 1603. It is why, after so many years, the mystery refuses to die. 4 centuries after her death, Elizabeth Tudor is no longer just a queen in history books. She has become a cultural icon, a puzzle, a legend that refuses to fade. Her secrets are now as famous as her victories, and they haunt both scholarship and popular imagination. On screen, she is reborn again and again. Glenda Jackson's Elizabeth was iron-willed, commanding and sharp. Cate Blanchett's Elizabeth was radiant and haunted, a woman trapped between glory and loneliness. Each performance captures something of her myth, but always returns to the same tension: her virginity, her mask, her body hidden from the world. Directors linger on her powdered face, her heavy gowns, her refusal to share herself with any man. Audiences sense it instinctively. The Virgin Queen was as much a performance as a person. Historians wrestle with this duality. Some see her as a feminist icon, a woman who turned patriarchy against itself by claiming her body as her own. Others argue that the title of Virgin Queen was itself a prison, reducing her to what she withheld rather than what she achieved. Debates over the Bisley Boy legend, her possible illnesses, and her infertility fill books and conferences. Even serious scholars admit that gaps in the record make it impossible to dismiss every rumor outright. Meanwhile, the internet amplifies what once lived only in whispers. Conspiracy forums dissect her portraits, arguing about her jawline, her hands, her chest. YouTube channels speculate about poisons, hidden cancers, endocrine disorders. TikTok storytellers condense her life into a few shocking seconds. The Queen, who may not have been a woman at all. In this age of endless retelling, Elizabeth's enigma finds new life with every click. Tourism thrives on it too. At the Tower of London, guides mention her ghost with relish, claiming her spirit still paces the stone. At Westminster Abbey, visitors pause before her tomb, wondering what lies sealed beneath the marble. In Gloucestershire, the Bisley Boy story is told on village tours, a local legend turned attraction. Wherever her name appears, people lean closer, eager for the forbidden, the grotesque, the possibility of truth hidden under centuries of silence. And so, Elizabeth's legacy is no longer just the defeat of the Armada, the patronage of Shakespeare, or the forging of empire. It is also the silence of her tomb, the mystery of her body, the fascination that endures when fact and rumor blur. She is remembered not only for what she accomplished, but for what she concealed. Perhaps that is why she still endures when other monarchs fade. She is not only history, she is myth, ghost, riddle. A queen who became immortal not through sainthood or bloodline, but through the enigma she left behind. But if her legacy is mystery itself, then one final question lingers. Is the Virgin Queen's greatest triumph that she kept her secret, or is her greatest failure that we still cannot stop searching for it? For 45 years, Elizabeth Tudor ruled as Gloriana, the Virgin Queen. She faced down enemies at home and abroad, defied every expectation of a woman in her age, and turned her unmarried body into the very foundation of her throne. Yet when death came, the mask slipped. Beneath the powder and pearls lay something far more human, perhaps scarred, perhaps poisoned, perhaps broken in ways no subject could ever be allowed to see. We have walked through her life, the child declared a bastard, the prisoner in the tower, the queen who refused to marry, the monarch who built an empire of myth. We have heard the whispers of hidden lovers, deformities, impostors. We have examined the letters, the portraits, the fragments of evidence. We have listened to the ghost stories that refuse to die, the footsteps and shadows that still haunt her palaces. And still, her coffin remains sealed. No DNA, no autopsy, no scientific truth. 400 years later, her secret lies where she left it, buried in stone, guarded by silence. So what are we to make of Elizabeth? Was she a genius of image, using her body as armor in a world that sought to own it? Was she a victim of vanity, poisoned by the very mask that preserved her legend? Or was she something stranger still, an impostor, a Bisley Boy, a monarch whose identity itself was a performance? The Virgin Queen's greatest triumph may not have been defeating the Spanish Armada, or patronizing Shakespeare, or leading England into its golden age. It may have been protecting her secrets so completely that we are still debating it today. Perhaps that is why she endures, not as a woman we can fully know, but as a riddle we can never solve. And now I turn the question to you. If the tomb of Elizabeth Tudor were opened tomorrow, would you want the truth uncovered at last? Or should her mystery remain untouched, her silence preserved, her crown unbroken? Tell me what you believe. Do you see Elizabeth as a brilliant strategist who chose virginity as power, or as a woman hiding something her world could never accept? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story has unsettled you, if it has made you look at the Virgin Queen in a different light, then stay with us. Like, subscribe, and join us again as we uncover more shadows from history where power, myth, and mystery intertwine. Because the past is never silent. It waits, whispering. And sometimes, as with Elizabeth Tudor, the silence is darker than the truth itself.